watching us here right after India has beaten England by a huge, massive margin of 336 runs in that second test at Edgbaston, Birmingham. But more than this being an act of revenge, more than this being a win that signifies scores being level before they head to the all-important third test in Lords, I think this was about redemption. This was a redemption for all that criticism and critique that this Indian squad had experienced right from the selection. Question marks over the selection for this test against England, which was crucial, a test that they needed to at least win to go level up. There were a lot of questions of them being defensive in their approach. There were a lot of questions on Shubman Gill's captaincy, a very young captain who had to keep proving himself. This was a tough transition phase, and it is going to continue to be for a young Indian squad, minus the services of senior hands who really defined Indian cricket till now, like Virat Kohli and Rohit Sharma. And there were moments in the series up until this test where you really missed the aggression and the kind of impacts that someone like Virat Kohli brings, not just as a batter, but as a leader in this unit. There were a lot of question marks around the head coach, Gautam Gambhir, because India is coming into this particular series against England on the back of failures and losses to Australia in that Border Gavaskar series, a loss to New Zealand at home. That was a whitewash. So there were a lot of criticism and there was a lot of backlash that the Indian team was getting as they played this second test. Question marks even on a bowling unit minus the services of Jasprit Bumrah, a bowling unit where everyone really questioned the potency of the attack without the experience of someone like Jasprit Bumrah. All of those questions have been answered, and how this was a fitting response to every single negativity, every single question that had been asked of this Indian squad, whether it was of the head coach, whether it was of Shubman Gill, and of course the entire young unit coming back with a bang to win that second test in Birmingham and really breaching a fortress here. First time a winning here at Edgbaston, a huge achievement, this creating history practically has India by this win. So what really worked for this Indian side? What were the reasons why they actually won? In fact, this is one of the biggest margins in an away test for India. 336 against England in this particular year. I'm told that was the highest margin of victories, and isn't this really sweet? So if you have to look at a lot of the positives for India, in fact, starting off with the captain himself, why not? Let's begin with that, because I think one of the reasons why there was a lot of criticism heading into this particular test was around the selection. There were India had gone with a very, very batting heavy squad, packed with a lot of all-rounders. They were banking on batting their opposition out of contest, batting them out of competition entirely. And many question whether that was really being defensive, because the batters really performed in that first test. You did have mammoth totals for both the innings in that first test at Leeds. What really put India down or let India down was their bowling. So there were a lot of queries and concerns over whether India was really going at this test through a negative approach. Were they trying to play defensive and only trying to aim for a draw rather than go for the win? Where they completely turned all of that around by very, very clinical display with the bat, the captain leading from the front, and broke many records with that stunning performance, not just in the first innings with that double century, but also in that second innings when he racked up 150 to push that target to a near improbable 600 odd to get in just one day and a little more. There were a lot of concerns over whether India had declared a tad later than they should have, but clearly this gave a fitting response to all of those concerns. Shubman Gill with that double 100 and that 100 really set the stage up. As a captain, he led from the front, his bat doing all the talking, and he answered all critics who questioned whether he was being more reactive than proactive and taking the initiative. He did that in that last innings on day 5 as a captain as well. Broke a lot of records that, like I said, just a reminder of all that he's done. He's the first captain to have scored a double hundred and 100 against England. Only the second Indian to do so, after Sunil Gavaskar accomplished that feat way back, decades back, against West Indies, if I'm not mistaken. But this feat really was incredible. He's also done a few other things with that particular performance with the bat in both those matches. And if I could just refer to those achievements, he's the first. He's the Indian to have scored most runs as captain against England so far in 2 Test matches. Most runs as captain at this point. He also led from the front and scored most runs as captain against England so far in those first 2 Tests. So really, and it was also poetic that he ended up taking that last catch to dismiss the 10th batter for England. Have to speak about his vice captain as well. You saw a very, very sweet moment at the end when Shubman Gill and Rishabh Pant really shook hands and knowingly smiled, gave that knowing smile to each other, really indicating that this was a job well done. And both the men at the helm of affairs, the captain and his vice, really did it together. Again, the second batter who was clinical as well in this test and who's been really performing not just here but from the first test at Leeds has been the vice captain of the Indian team. Again, someone who has received so much criticism for the way he performed and his way he's batted in the past and how spontaneous he's always been, and somehow forgotten the situation that India was at. Again, what a way to silence all of that and really come out on top. So that were few of the positives. We have to speak about India's bowling, because they were really under fire. A unit that really doesn't have the services of Jasprit Bumrah can really come under a lot of pressure. And they were justifiably so because of the way that they had bowled in the first inning, in the first match at Leeds against England. You only had Bumrah, who looked really threatening and who got most success with that fifer. None of the other bowlers, whether it was Siraj, whether it was Prasidh Krishna, really created as much impact as their senior and the man in charge, Bumrah, did. So a lot of pressure on this young bowling unit heading into this test here, but they stood up and delivered. First up, I have to speak about Akash Deep, Morning Muckle, the bowling coach, heaped praise on someone like him who is so used to bowling non-stop and consistently in flat tracks at home that this really seemed like second coming for him. Morning Muckle spoke of the hunger that he has, of how Akash Deep comes in and does the hard yards, does what is asked of him. And he looked unplayable here on a lot of occasions. Some deliveries that really got the breakthrough and got those key wickets in that first innings were unplayable. Remarkable deliveries to set up all the pressure as the tests and the day progressed, as the test match progressed from day 1 right till day 5. In fact, India's first wins at English venue, you had Oval back in 1971, you had Lords in 1986. Trent Bridge was, of course, the latest, and in 2007, that historic series that India won. And of course, this one here at Edgbaston is going to be memorable and is going to be something that's unforgettable. What an achievement for Shubman Gill to have under his belt as a young test captain, taking over the reins from someone like Rohit Sharma, who's really led with so much ease. I think this is going to do a world of confidence for him, not just as a captain, but also as a batter. And really, you see how every single member there is secure in the way they are, is secure in the way they perform, and come in and do the job when is most needed. Which is why I'll have to speak about Mohammad Siraj. Again, someone who was under a lot of pressure, on whom leading the bowling attack was critical in this test, really did the job there for his side, and led from the front as well, making sure that he gave Akash Deep enough support there and didn't let the pressure off from the English batters. whether it was Joe Root, whether it was Ben Stokes, they kept the pressure up. So did someone like Ravindra Jadeja. Have to mention him as well here. Bowled impeccably well and far, far more challengingly than he had at Leeds. It looked like everyone had taken, or the entire bowling unit had taken their lessons, had taken the leaf out of what had happened and gone down at Leeds, and had done a bit of a U-turn here to give England a taste of their own medicine and remind them that this series is well and truly very, very much alive. Definitely a word on the management there, on the coaching staff, and everyone who quietly went about their business despite everyone questioning why they had gone ahead with certain choices, why they looked like they were, why did they drop someone like Sai Sudarshan, why were they trying to make so many changes, and as they headed into Edgbaston, really what a fitting response to everyone who even questioned um, why India made those changes, or why they had certain strategies in place. This was a very, very surefire way to silence all of them. A word on England, they'll of course know that this isn't something that they would have liked to not to have at this point in their series, but they'll be happy nevertheless because it came earlier on. A bit of a setback early in the series rather than later is always something that can put you in a better frame of mind. You go back to the drawing board, you go back and try and see where you possibly went wrong. They did have a few good performers even from their end, someone like Harry Brook, again, a youngster there who steps up each time and has been trying to take more responsibility as the leader in that batting lineup. So to someone like Jamie Smith, fantastic, fantastic keeper batter for them. An incredible find for England, and he's someone who's definitely going to prove to be a thorn in the side of India as the series progresses. Of course, we're looking ahead to Lords at this point. As I wrap up this review, it's going to be an exciting test to look forward to. It starts just a few days from now on the 10th of this month. There are, of course, you'll expect someone like Bumrah to come back in, but here's the delicious problem that India is going to have to try and solve. Who will Jasprit Bumrah replace if he does come back into the 11? Because after the way Akash Deep performed on a track that clearly had a lot more for the batters than it did for the bowlers, can you really keep him away from a playing 11, especially at Lords? There's going to be that slope. There's going to be a few things that will go the bowling side's way. And of course, the toss is going to be crucial. Ben Stokes has been on the right end of it in the first two tests, and a lot of which way the toss goes will also play a bit of a factor into how the test progresses and who really comes out on top. So a lot of delicious concerns for India. Do they tinker a lot really from the playing 11 here that took the field at Birmingham, at Edgbaston, or do they just make that one change for just Bumrah? If so, in whose place? Could that be Nitish Reddy thinking that, okay, their batters are really picking up the pace, their batters are really making it count? You did have Jaiswal as well showing promise. You have a KL Rahul who is looking good, though hasn't made a big mark in this particular test. But you're seeing all these batters really knowing how to set in and at least dig deep, which is what they'll have to do at Lords, because it's not going to be easy. And a bruised England side is going to be a far more dangerous one to compete against. So that's it. I'm going to be wrapping this up here. But of course, you keep following us on Firstpost and do stay tuned for all our updates and all perspectives from the world of sports on our first sports stream. Thanks.